What are invasive alien species? Well, it depends on who you ask. I'm going to look at what two different organizations that deal with nature conservation say they are. The Convention on Biological Diversity says that invasive alien species are species whose introduction and/or spread outside their natural past or present distribution threatens biological diversity. And these invasive alien species can be animals, plants, fungi, and microorganisms like bacteria. So let's see how that definition works out for one very common non-native species found in Ireland. Solanum tuberosum is a non-native species grown in Ireland. It's got quite pretty flowers, but it's probably its tubers that it's mostly grown for. It's the potato. The potato is originally from Peru and parts of northern Bolivia in South America, but now it's managed to make its way all over the world. In China, nearly 100 million metric tons of potatoes are harvested every year. India is in second place with nearly 50 million tons per year. Russia, nearly 30 million. And in 30th place, Denmark with just over 2 million. So then the potato has definitely been introduced or spread outside its natural past or present distribution. But does it threaten biological diversity? I'll let you have a think about that one. And for those of you who are wondering, Ireland produces about 455,000 tons of potatoes per year. The International Union for Conservation of Nature says invasive alien species are species that are introduced accidentally or intentionally outside of their natural geographic range, and they become problematic in the places where they're introduced. So both of those definitions have one thing in common. Invasive species are species that have been introduced somehow outside of where they would naturally be found. Now, the Convention on Biological Diversity says that these invasive alien species threaten biodiversity where they're introduced, while the IUCN just says that they become problematic. So if we go with the IUCN definition, then maybe the potato's off the hook, which is a good thing because I like chips. Over the past 4,500 years, we've introduced a lot of plants for food and for our gardens. Over 2,000 plant species have been recorded in Ireland, and about half of those are not native. They were introduced, but only about 60 of those plant species are currently a problem. Invasive alien species are alien because they've been introduced to places that are outside of their natural geographic range, and they become problematic in the places they're introduced to. But what kind of problems do they cause? Like other organizations around the world, the EU has a lot of rules to try to manage the problems that can be caused by invasive alien species. One of those rules, to do with the prevention and management of the introduction and spread of invasive alien species, says that invasive alien species have a negative impact on biodiversity, on native species, on the structure and functioning of ecosystems, and on the transmission of diseases, as well as social and economic impacts, and in some cases they can have a significant negative impact on human health. Convention on Biological Diversity says that invasive alien species are a direct driver of biodiversity loss around the world. Based on information it gathered from governments all around the world, an organization called IPBES puts invasive alien species on its list of the top 5 things that have a negative impact on nature on the planet. So what are these invasive alien species in Ireland, and what do they look like? Well, in the European Communities Birds and Natural Habitats Regulations 2011, right near the end, in the third schedule, there's a list of invasive alien species that the regulations were set up to deal with. There's about 78 species listed in total, and the regulations also deal with vector material. An example of vector material would be soil taken from places infested with the invasive alien plant species Japanese knotweed. For many people, when they think of invasive alien species, the first species they think of is Japanese knotweed. And as is the case with other invasive alien species, very often the common name is a clue that a species has been introduced outside of its natural geographic range. Another place to find out about invasive alien species in Ireland is on the website of the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and they've rated species according to whether they think they would have a high impact or a medium impact on native biodiversity. These would include some species found on the third schedule of the European Community's Birds and Natural Habitats Regulations 2011, but also other species that aren't found in the schedule. These invasive alien species showed up in data that I downloaded for Douglas from the National Biodiversity Data Centre when I was researching for the Community Foundation for Ireland Biodiversity Action Plan. The National Biodiversity Data Centre gives each species a score so they can figure out which are the high impact and which are the medium impact species. For the high impact species, when you arrange them in order of these scores, the New Zealand flatworm has the highest score of all invasive species recorded in Douglas so far. Information from the Invasive Species Ireland website says that the New Zealand flatworm poses a serious risk to native earthworm populations. This could damage how our soil functions and cause problems for native animals that eat earthworms. On our list of invasive alien species, there are 2 flatworms. The Australian flatworm causes similar problems, but just not quite so severe. The harlequin ladybird is another invasive animal recorded in Douglas. Information from the Invasive Species Ireland website and the National Biodiversity Data Centre shows that it can cause problems for native ladybirds, butterflies, moths, and other native invertebrates, as well as crops and human health. It was first recorded in the Republic of Ireland in 2010, Northern Ireland in 2007, and in the UK in 2004. Originally from Asia, it's been widely used to control aphids in crop production for about the last 100 years, and this is probably how it spread. Let's look now at some invasive plant species recorded in Douglas. So on the left, we've got Japanese knotweed. So Japanese knotweed is native in Japan, but also China and Korea. It was brought to Europe in the early to mid-19th century. All plants of Japanese knotweed in the wild in Europe are thought to be female. It can't produce seed, so all spread is vegetative. A small piece of the leaf or stem can easily grow into an entirely new plant. All plants of Japanese knotweed in the wild in the UK are thought to be clones of a single plant that was introduced in the 19th century. Japanese knotweed is related to our native docks. This is a map of where Japanese knotweed has been recorded on the island of Ireland so far. Its fast-growing underground rhizomes means it can quickly take over an area, leaving little space for native plant species. Along riverbanks, when it dies back in winter, because there's hardly any native vegetation left, soil from the bank is easily washed into rivers, which can be a problem for plants and animals in them. Douglas Tidy Towns and Wildwork, with support from Cork County Council and Cork City Council, have done a lot of work to control Japanese knotweed in the Mangala. And Douglas Tidy Towns have also worked to control cherry laurel in the Mangala. Cherry laurel is a high-impact invasive species. Traveller's joy is another invasive alien plant species that's recorded in Douglas. It's only assessed as being of medium impact on native biodiversity, but this photograph of Traveller's joy smothering trees and other vegetation along the Rochestown Road shows it can have quite a high impact locally. In Ireland, it's most often recorded along the south coast. Traveller's joy, also known as old man's beard, is not controlled by law in Ireland. It's been in Ireland since the 19th century at least. It's native in the south of England. I'm not sure how exactly it was introduced to Ireland. It's spread by seed. It can produce over 17,000 seeds per half a square metre, and the feathery pappus means these are easily spread by the wind. It smothers native plants, and it can provoke dermatitis in people. Traveller's joy is in the same family as the buttercup.